Hello everyone, Alpha Soul here, and welcome to another video. Today we're actually just going to really quickly cover the live stream that just occurred from the Ashes of Creation crew on July 31st, 2020. Now, it just happened a couple hours ago. I was actually waiting for them to get up their YouTube video. The YouTube video link will be down below, but I was waiting for them to get up their YouTube video so I can showcase that footage in the background as opposed to some of the other footage that I have. So you can see some of the footage from the live stream there, but again, check out the full video. A lot of good information in there. So without any further ado, let's just touch on some of the points that I found interesting and some good basic information to have. So a reminder for those of you who are backers of Leaders of Men or higher, for that support package, there will be a test, a pre-alpha test within August of, actually, yeah, it's going to be August tomorrow, but it's going to be in August, and I'm probably guessing it's going to be towards the end of August as opposed to like the first week or something like that. But yes, so that test will be coming, and expect to actually be a part of that. One interesting thing that they covered in that I thought, that I remember that they actually had mentioned is there was a period where they actually cut off the sale of any packages that allowed people to get into Alpha 1. And I think the reasoning that they had was they wanted to keep that number to about 10,000 people maximum, and anything above that, they wanted to keep the test at least smaller to that proportion. So they cut it off there. Now, they mentioned that they could potentially open up later, but as of right now, it's still closed. So if you didn't, purchase in before then, unfortunately, you're a little bit out of luck. Yeah, so let's see. The other thing that I found interesting was they talked about the scaling of systems. Now, it may seem a little bit dry to people, but there's a reason why I like to focus in on these, right? So Jeff on the stream specifically talked about how systems would scale, right? And how the team is working on implementing and building scalable solutions that will allow them to help build the world, right? So a good example is, let's say they've got this huge world that's there out, and they do have a huge world. The method that he gave an example was you have different monster spawners that are around the world that sole purpose is to spawn a monster given a certain criteria, right? Well, normally you would have to, put those spawners in manually. And when you think about it, with a world like Ashes of Creation, which is that big, it can be extremely cumbersome to do so. And even if you, want to do it one way or another, and then it depends on, how a node develops. So if you think about it, that's an onerous task that they might have to repeat over and over and over. So the fact that they're building something that will allow them to do it in an automated fashion means that they can scale these things up quicker. But the thing that I find most interesting with that, because it lets me kind of know where they are in development, if you will. So seeing them at that portion, like obviously I won't be able to tell specifically how far along they are. I would obviously love to know that, but it does kind of give you where they're going and where their head is at, right, for it. And it's very comforting to hear them planning for a long-term solution and something that they know and they're planning for to just keep currently iterating on and having the ability to have as many, or to have as little people expanding the world as possible. So that was very nice. They showed off, a good bunch of graphics and, blink animations and stuff like that. One of the things that they mentioned, or that Steven mentioned with regards to the blink animation, which I thought was pretty interesting for skills, especially if it means other skills will be affected in a similar way, is that as the blink animation, like as you invest skills into the blink animation, you may gain something rather than just blinking forward into a set direction. You may gain something like the ability to control your blink, like you blink and you start moving around with it or something of the sort. That is pretty cool, because that lets me know that their idea for skills isn't as static as I thought it was. It actually is going to be something that's interesting that will move around like that. And then there was also another skill that they mentioned about how it changes. Like they showed off this laser beam that went through, and the laser beam on a low level would stop upon hitting a target, but on a high level it would be like a piercing thing, and it's something you have to aim. That was pretty cool. Good graphics and good skill concept talk. There was a showcase within the live stream of the dungeon. There was a lot of showcasing of the it was mainly just an aerial view of the dungeon that a lot of us saw within the Alpha 1. It's this dungeon, it's a fiery dungeon, it's got the Ember Dragon at the end. But that particular dungeon, they kind of did an aerial view, and it was nice to look at on that side, just to kind of get a better view of the scale, if you will, of it. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing to see. The thing that I found interesting, though, of that portion was he started talking about what happens if you are in a group and you come across another group in a dungeon, right? Remember, and this is a question that's actually been on my mind. Remember, these are open world dungeons, right? So anyone can come along and, see you fighting in there and, have to deal with you in some way, shape, or form. Now, the corruption in system in Ashes of Creation is one that, penalizes you for attacking a combative person. Now, there's a good write-up on how the corruptive system works. I'll try and link it down below, but the basic gist is, you will gain corruption if you kill someone unnecessarily, right? So, what's interesting to hear is he brought up, okay, let's say you've got, a group in one area, another group comes along, they're like, hey, can we take that spot? First group says, no, we're going to stay here forever. What are the second group's options, right? And it sounded like, well, you can PvP. Obviously, the second group can go ahead and kill the first group and take a corruption hit. We don't know how heavy or serious that corruption hit will be, but that is a possibility. The second option is what I found interesting, and I would like to hear more for. And he mentioned about a war declaration, right? The war declaration thing is going to be a very interesting thing to cover, because I'd like to hear more details on how it works, because I can understand two guilds warring, I can understand two nodes warring, but two groups warring, that to me opens a very, like, if two groups can war and, you can just declare a war and one doesn't have to accept or anything like that, I don't know how you would do it. That would kind of almost defeat the purpose, if you will, of the corruption system at all. Now, again, I'd like to hear more about it, just because I don't know where he was going with that, and I think he'll expand more on that. So yeah, that was interesting to hear, because I almost would think that it's almost like SOL, or you gotta DPS them, if you will, to kind of get them to force if you don't want to risk. But if they're a natural node enemy, that's a different story, right? Just kill them, right? But we'll see what happens with that one. He also touched on something about groups tagging monsters and sharing the XP. I thought that was interesting, because that was very similar to a similar question that was last week, like, what happened if two groups tag a raid monster, who gets the loot? He had answered that question from a loot perspective, but it's interesting, he hadn't talked about it from an EXP perspective, and here he does, and it sounds like they share the experience between the two, which I found interesting, only because my brain immediately goes to, okay, well, how can you grief, or how can you exploit this, right? I understand that it makes it probably harder for someone to exploit as far as power leveling people, but it's probably, I think it can easily be used as a grief tactic from like a higher level player or even group of people versus a lower level player who may be soloing or something like that. I'd be interesting to see kind of this go to fruition, and let's see how it actually turns out. But yeah, that's something that pops to mind that I'm kind of wary of. They showcase swimming. That was cool. It was great to see. It actually very much reminded me of Arcade in some point, of going down and having that big of an expansive world that includes the undersea. And I'm actually really excited of that. So that was good to see. I love the spider, the triceratops that they showed. Those were good things. And they also touched on the fact that the game won't be divided into level 10 area, level 20, 30 area. And as far as resources goes, they're going to be spread into different regions, which is also a great thing. That creates more of a living world. That is, I really like that concept, because that opens up some really exciting things, like warring over resources or figuring out how to do things like that. That's just absolutely fantastic. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I had one more note. What the heck did I mean by that note? I wrote something down, and it says services in STLLS. Was that? I don't know what the heck I was. now I remember what I wanted to talk about. Classes. I don't know what the heck I wrote, but it was classes. So one thing that they mentioned in the stream was that there are going to be 5 classes in the beta, or sorry, in the Alchemist Creation Alpha. The alpha that we're going to be testing that is upcoming this fall, there will be 5 classes. So it's interesting. Now, Ashes of Creation normally has, I think, 8 base classes: the Bard, Cleric, Fighter, Mage, Ranger, Rogue, Summoner, and Tank, right? And I'm going to do a larger video on this, just talking about the classes in general, but you will then be able to customize them by combining them with one other class, a secondary class. For example, a Tank plus a Cleric is a Paladin, right? That's, they're pretty simple, but like something like a Rogue plus a Ranger is a Predator, right? You'll be able to do things like that. But in the actual, in the alpha, you'll have access to 5 classes. Now, I have a feeling, I think I know what those classes might be. This is not by anyone at Intrepid telling me or anything like that. So the pre-alpha that I played, we had the Tank, the Cleric, and the Mage, right? And I think those 3 will be in there as well. I think from their past comments, they said 2 of the more difficult classes for them to do were, I think, the Bard and the Summoner, right? They just said they were technically difficult just because some of the mechanics around the classes, like the Summoner, you've got pets, whereas the Bard, I think it was something to do with like the area around or something like that. So I think we can assume that they won't be those 2 classes. So of the classes left, that leaves the Fighter, the Ranger, and the Rogue, right? So, and given those 3 previously that I mentioned, the Mage, Tank, and Cleric already being in, I'm probably going to guess the Ranger and Fighter. I would love it to be the Rogue. Rogue is going to be my class of choice more than likely, but it could be the Rogue, but I think Fighter might be more likely. But I could be wrong. It could be the Rogue. Hope it's the Rogue. So I think we're potentially facing, for the first alpha coming up, the Tank, the Cleric, again, either the Fighter or the Rogue, and then the Mage, basically, right? So, and then the Ranger, sorry. So I'm pretty sure that the Ranger will probably be in there, because it'll have that another kind of range class. I think that makes the most sense, but that's just speculation. But that's what I wanted to cover. But anyways, let me know what you guys found most interesting about the stream. I'm curious of your thoughts. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys. Have a great day. Alpha Soul out.